Okay, so today I want to talk about basically like the biggest way I want you to pick your strategy and think about things to get more results. So I'm just going to cut to the chase right away and basically tell you what you, Claire. But I am going to give you a ton of examples. So you guys know I'm serious about it if I actually wrote down examples. So I didn't have to think of them on the spot. And I wrote down a lot of examples today. Very proud of myself. Means I'm very excited about this topic. So I'll tell you what the thing is. We'll talk about the value of it. And then I'm going to walk you through a bunch of different examples that I could think of from different clients, because I think that's really relevant here too. So basically the question I ask and the way that I think about it that is so freaking important is, am I stacking or am I versus shift question is really, really, really important. So what I teach clients is that we stack strategies, and what a lot of people do that keeps them stuck and not growing very fast is they shift strategies. So what I mean by that, what I mean by stack is like we lay a foundation and then we stack things on top of it. So if we do something, it's not in place of doing something else, right? Again, I'm going to give you examples. So if it doesn't totally land yet, I promise we'll get there. But I'm always asking clients the question, like if they come to me and they're like, oh, I want to try this new thing or this new idea, it's like, can we stack that or would that be a shift? Right? And so what a stack means is I'm already doing these things and I'm doing them really well, and my team is helping me enough and whatever that is. And so I know that I can stack another strategy on top of it. And this is how we create exponential growth. Okay. If we're saying, hey, like I have this foundation, but I want to do this thing over here. And in order to have time, team energy, all that, we would have to shift, meaning we would have to give some of this stuff up, right? To be able to shift to do this. Shifting is a very, very, very hard way to scale. It's a hard way to get fast results, and it's really fucking frustrating, right? Stacking is basically a guarantee to help you get more results, okay? So again, we're going to walk through a bunch of examples on this, but it is so freaking important. Hi, Mira. It's good to see you. Hi, Harshit. Oh my gosh, so good to see you guys. Clara says, yes, I use the analogy of building a house with strong foundations. 100%, right? Like so analogous to that, in the sense that ultimately, if you're building a house, you're stacking on a foundation, right? If you're shifting, like that house is never coming to completion, right? I think that, it's almost like without the foundation, it's never really going to pan out, sort of thing. And this is what happens in online business, is a lot of people never lay a strong enough foundation to stack a bunch of strategies on top of, and they're wondering why it feels so hard to grow. And it's like, that's why. So even in looking back at your own business, you can probably see those times where you've really been in shift mode instead of stack mode. And it sort of explains sometimes like why we haven't gotten the results that we wanted, because it looks like this all the time instead of it looking like this, right? So really, really important to just sit with that question when you're about to do something new, is like, should I stack or should I shift? The thing with shifting too, and I really want to say this before we move on and get to like really specific examples, is that it's not just frustrating, but it's actually very time consuming and expensive. So what it takes to shift strategies is that you're redoing your daily task list, you're redoing your team's task list, you're probably investing in a new course or mentor or tool or whatever to shift that strategy. You're rebuilding that from the ground up. You're tweaking it, you're needing to get better at it, right? So it really takes quite a bit of energy to fully shift strategies. And so one of the reasons that I really, don't recommend that in most cases, although there's one case I do recommend it in, which we'll talk about, is because there is such an expense with it. So not only is it adding to your timeline, it's also literally taking from you, right? In terms of time, energy, and expense. Hi, Shonda. Good to see you. Yeah, shift versus stack. Yep. So feel free to drop them and I am happy to answer any and all questions related to this. But when you stack, it really gives you time to focus on something new, and it gives your team time. Or if you don't have a team, it lets you almost kind of like routinely do that previous thing without having to think about it. So you can put thought to the next thing, right? So that first piece should be very, very, very locked and loaded for you to then stack something on top of it. But that's how you know the foundation is solid, right? It's like the house example. Like, how do I know I can set something on this foundation? Because it's built, because it's solid, right? So I really want you to think about that, because if you have a team, for example, you're almost like, cool, we got this. We know it's working. You guys got this. I'm adding this other thing and I'm going to put my attention there. And it really helps you not only empower your team, but it actually is a super, super effective way to scale. If you're like, hey guys, I need all of you to come with me over here because we're totally shifting strategies to do this thing, then we're going to shift back over here. Not only are you having to shift your time, energy, effort, daily task list, you're having to do that for a whole team as well. And so even if you have a team of one, that gets extra expensive. That consumes a lot of extra time. And so you can see how if you're always shifting, you're going to be doing a lot of work without nearly as much results in your business. Feel so fucking frustrated in their business because they're like, I'm working so hard. I'm doing all the things I've tried, all the strategies. I'm an expert at so many of them, and I'm not getting the results I want. And very reliably, it's because they're shifting, not stacking. Cool. So the last thing I want to say about this before we kind of move on to the examples is that sometimes this question of like, are you shifting or are you stacking, is really hard to ask, because a lot of the time, especially as you grow and scale, the answer is no. Like, I genuinely can't stack at this point. So that's how I'll ask it to my clients most often, is I'll be like, is this a stack? Like, are we stacking this on top of what we're already doing? And sometimes they're really frustrated because they're like, I want to do this thing stack. Like, I can see how, like, there's just no room to stack. It would have to be a shift. And so then what happens from there is not that you have to shift, but it's that you have to figure out what you can do to change that answer long term. And sometimes that takes a lot of fucking patience, right? So if it's like, hey, I want to do this new thing, I realize it is not a stack opportunity right now, then the question is, cool, what needs to happen with team to allow us to stack this? What do we need more? Or, what needs to happen with your boundaries for us to stack this? Like, do you need to pull back on how often you're showing up in programs or whatever? Like, that's just an example, but it's like, then there's patience involved in getting to the point where it can be a stack, right? And I wrote out some examples of how I've done that in my business that I'll give you too. But yeah, like, you have to be really, really rigorously honest with yourself here. Like, can I actually stack it, or am I fooling myself? And if I can't, how do I actually make a long-term game plan for that and be patient in the meantime? If you're just always adding, you're going to really burn out. If you're always shifting, you're going to really burn out. So you have to be asking that question, can I stack? And if the answer is like, right now, I just know it would be too much, that's okay. It doesn't mean you can't do that thing. It means your next step is a game plan to be able to stack that thing. Does that make sense? But like, it's hard. I really get that. Like, for me and a lot of my clients, the answer has been no quite often. And then we have to figure out what we have to do to change that answer long term. But when you see, okay, like, I'm hitting that edge and the answer is no, that also is not a bad thing, because it means you're scaling. Like, I had this exact conversation with one of my clients this morning, and the only option for her basically at this point is to add team and delegate more. And like, yeah, that's frustrating when you're feeling that impatience of like, I want to do more, I want to do more, I want to do more. But it's also so good because it means you're at that point where you need to scale more. And it means that like the growth of seeing like I have to add team and I have to be patient while that happens so I can go to the next level is a really good place to be. If you just keep adding, you're going to burn out and then you're not actually scaling. Like I think that's keeping most online business owners from scaling is not because they're not doing enough. It's because they actually fucking burn out. Right? So I just want to say that because sometimes I think we can be so hard on ourselves when it's like, oh, but why can't I just figure out a way to stack that? Or do I really have to be patient while I get that new team member? Like, yeah, because that's long-term scalability. That's long-term growth. That's how you stay in business for years to come. So you ask this question and you stay ridiculously honest with yourself about it. Belinda says, I'm afraid my team will drown me if I switch focuses. Belinda, you have a good team then. And yeah, like this is something you can communicate to your team too. Like, hey, we want to take a stack versus shift mentality. How can you guys help keep me accountable to that? Right. Okay, cool. So let me give you some examples. So I have some examples for when you're a little bit newer, when you're a little bit further along. You guys tell me what you have questions on. But one example of stacking is like, say you're new and like you're totally overwhelmed. You're like getting visible for the first time, right? I really would say show up on one platform first, right? So let's say you're brand new and you just started showing up on Facebook. Nail that before you stack Instagram. And then when you stack Instagram, Facebook should feel easy enough that it's a flow. You're not really thinking about it. It's simple to execute on every day. And then you put Instagram on top of that. You're shifting back and forth. Like this week, you're like, oh, I really need to nail my Facebook group. Next week, you're like, I should be doing better on Instagram. Let me put my focus there. And then you come back over here and you're like, shit, I should be posting in other groups. Then you jump back over here and you're like, why am I not on stories more? You're just shifting all the time and you're going to feel super fucking drained and it's not going to work out. So nail Facebook. Like, what do you want to do with Facebook? Do you want to have your own group? Do you want to get really good at groups? Do you want to be able to write content for it and show up every day? Cool. Once that's solid, add a platform, right? It's so hard to have that patience. And we think like, I can do it all. I can do it all. Cool. If you really can, then it should only take you a couple weeks to nail Facebook. That like shouldn't be a big deal, right? But still get that locked and loaded before you stack on top of it. Because once that's like, oh yeah, that's in the flow, that's easy. It's like brushing my teeth, right? The next thing you add on top of it can get the majority of your energy time. Like it's very unlikely that you're just going to knock it out of the park with a new strategy or a new platform if you can't devote the majority of your attention to it because you're also trying to do 3 other things well, right? So make sure you get to the point where it feels like that we're good here. Like that's unlocked. What's next? So that's just an example if you're at the beginning. Now, say you have started showing up and marketing in other groups consistently, then you can start your own group. Not as a shift out of showing up in other groups, though. I see this happen to people all the time. They show up on Facebook and they're like posting in other groups and they're being really consistent there. And then they decide they want to start their own. And almost right away, they fall off from posting in other communities. So then they're in their group and putting out content there. And then they're like, well, shit, why is my group not growing? Well, because you stopped showing up in the place all the other people were. So do you see how that could be a stack where it's like, oh, I'm like really showing up in other groups. Then I start my own. Then these people are coming to mine and we're like continuing to build. Or it can be like, I'm showing up in other groups. Then I start mine. Then I'm not showing up over here. Then I have to come back over here. And it's like a shift, right? So it's like we can take almost the same action. Like it can still be the step of like show up and post in other communities, then start your own. But it's like, do I stop doing that thing I was doing in favor of doing this? Do you see what I mean there? It's so important to have that distinction because it is such a frustration point for people where they're like, just like constantly bouncing around, and now they have their own group and they're like, why is my group not growing? This is so frustrating. What's going on? I get it. I really do, but it's because it was a shift and not a to stack something on top of what you were already doing. You just replaced it, right? And so not only is that super frustrating, but all that work you put in to nurturing other communities is kind of falling by the wayside, right? So not only does it feel like a complete shift, it's actually wasted effort. Like I absolutely hate it when I see this happen with entrepreneurs where they just like really put their heart into something and then they shift and like all that effort they put in is almost wasted at that point. So this is just an example of like, if you're going to start something else like that, by all means, like I'm such a fan of having a Facebook, or you're going to put all this work into your own community and then be like, wait, where are the people? Do you see what I mean? Yeah, your examples are too good because that's exactly what happens. I know it. I know it. And it kills me because it's such a hard thing to catch yourself in, but it is such a fucking important thing. And will make all the difference. So yeah, it's like exactly what happens. Okay. Here's another one. So say you're past that and say you have been pitching to podcasts. You're like out there, you're doing great, you're getting yourself on other podcasts, so much so that now you've decided to start your own, right? Yay. But then again, similar to the group, what can happen is, so now you start your own, but you don't have guests, because guests are obviously yourself to other podcasts. So you were, growing your reach, growing your marketing, then you were pitching yourself to podcasts. Now you start your own and you totally stop pitching yourself or pitching and asking guests to come on, right? That is a shift. I was already pitching myself and getting out there in the podcast circuit. Then I start mine and I stop, right? I'm always asking clients if they've been on podcasts and they want to start their own. I'm like, cool, can you feasibly start your own and keep sharing and keep pitching yourself? Now, that doesn't mean you never have to take a break, maybe when you're launching yours or starting it for the first time. I'm not like a slave driver here, okay? You totally can take a break. But what I really think is important is that it is a stack that you can handle long term. Does that make sense? So you might say like, oh yeah, I need a quick break to, launch this thing or whatever. But I know that I'm going to get right back in to doing that. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. Next example. Also, I realized, sorry, rewind. This just clicked for me that I just said slave driver, and I really feel awful for saying that. And it was just totally a slip of the tongue. Regrettably, should not have said that. So I just want to call myself out on that. My apologies, not the move. But you totally understand and get what I mean there. That was just not the right context at all. So anyway, next one. Here's a good one. This one's a hard one. Once you are launching multiple courses, you can stack by adding a higher level mastermind, but not shift to where then you stop selling those courses and those start to die out. I see this a lot with people as they're scaling. Now they have a lot more offers. They have more courses. They have more launches. They have more things happening, right? And guess what? It's so easy to be like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And it's like, we put so much effort, you guys, into building a course, right? We think about the promotion leading up to it, the launch event leading up to it, the emails to sell it, the promotion to sell it, the sales page, the actual course itself. Like, so much energy and effort goes into building that. And then so many people end up shifting, right? I am such a believer in sell that course again and again and only stack when you know that course can still be part of your repertoire, right? If you are shifting what you're selling so much, guess what? You are wasting so much time, energy, and effort, and you are not making it scalable. Repeating a launch is about 10 times easier than doing one for the first time, right? Like literally. And so, like actual statistic. And so stacking it, oh, thank you guys. Thank you for accepting my slip up there and understanding me. But seriously, like the investment in a course of that level, especially like the first time you launch it, is so high. So then what a lot of people do is they're like, oh, cool, what else can I offer? What else can I offer? And I'm not saying don't have a product suite, and maybe you only launch that course once a year. But if you put all that energy and effort in, and then you're ditching that in favor of the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, your business is going to feel so hard because you're always rebuilding. You might have a good launch sequence, but it's like you're rewriting the emails every time, you're creating a new sales page every time, you're doing a new conversion event every time, you're doing new promo posts every time, like, right? And so it can be so tempting, again, especially when you get to that level of your business, right? So tempting to now just do more things. But if you can see everything as a stack, like what's the add-on to this course? Like what's the next layer in the funnel from this course? Or what course is a complement to this course so we can still keep launching it? That's when you really win. Like my clients that are making $1 million, multi-millions, like that's what they're doing. They're stacking their offers. They're not shifting and forgetting about the course that they had and rebuilding one every time. Like it is so much effort to do that. And quite honestly, it makes it harder for you to get good at something. Like by the third time you're running a course, like your ability to get someone results is totally different than that first build. So there's a lot of other things that affects too if you're not stacking and you're always shifting, right? So those are like examples at every level in business of how stack versus shift is really, really, really valuable. Now I'm going to tell you some of my own. So what it's looked like in my business. You guys know I'm like pretty clear on the fact this exact reason, because I always want to be stacking. Like when I added the podcast, I wanted to know like that wasn't replacing my weekly live streams. That was a stack on top of it, right? So let me just give you some examples. I think I jumped ahead there, but like the first thing I added, so I added retreats once we were rock solid on our one-on-one delivery. I did not want to be in a situation where I felt like we were selling and offering retreats, and then when I was there, it was harder for me to fill my one-on-one, or it was harder for me to serve my one-on-one clients. Like I wanted to feel like, wow, I'm so spacious in serving my one-on-one clients that I could easily go away for a retreat and have no problem in keeping up with that, i.e. stack, right? The next thing we added was the podcast. Once we knew like we could run the Facebook group and have lives each week with a ton of ease. So I wasn't going to shift, right? Like I've been doing these lives for a very long time. Like I am not shifting away from them. They're a strategy that is solid and that works, right? So in doing the podcast, that was like my number one question to myself basically was like, can we stack this podcast on top of running the Facebook group, how we do, and having lives every week? Some of that's me, some of that's team. So some of that was a question for a team, like, hey, what is it going to look like to stack this on top of it? Right. And some of that was a question for me, like, hey, where does this fit in my calendar? What does this actually look like? So I know I talk about this all the time, but this is why calendaring is so useful, because you can actually answer this question. This is why time tracking is so useful, because you can actually answer this question both for your team and for yourself. Like if you know how many hours your team is spending on things, you can answer the stack versus shift question pretty easily. If you know how much time you're spending on things, you can answer the stack versus shift question pretty easily. Do you see what I mean? Right? If you don't know, it's going to be hard and you're going to be guessing on that. So to rewind, and I probably should have said this first, is you need to have really, really good eyes on what you're spending time on and what your team is spending time on to be able to answer these questions. A lot of times when I say to my clients, is that a stack or a shift? And they don't know, I'm like, we're not even talking about this until you go time track. Like we're not even going further down this road until you go calendar that out, right? Because we have to be able to see that to really know versus guess. Like I could be like, oh, I think I'd probably have time for a podcast versus like I can see how I would have time to record the podcast in this slot once a week and not give up my live stream. But where a lot of people get really stuck in figuring out the stack versus shift thing is that they don't have good enough eyes on their own time or their team's time. And so it's really hard to answer that question of, is it a stack or is it a shift? So if I'm asking you this and you're hearing this live stream and you're like, how would I know that? Track your time, track your team and what they're spending time on, and then calendar it out, like see it in your calendar. Like literally I can see my live stream on Mondays at 5 and I can see podcast recording on Tuesdays at 10 or whatever that is. Make sure it's a stack, right? Hey, Lauren, how many hours were you spending on one-on-one before you started retreats? I honestly don't know the answer to that, Lauren. That was quite a few years ago at this point. How many hours was I spending on one-on-one? I would definitely say, here's my answer to that. I had my version of a full one-on-one practice. So I think it depends on the person, what that is for them, but I probably had like 12 to 15 clients at that time. I don't know the exact amount of hours though, but like I was definitely like full in one-on-one. It was definitely like, that felt like a well-oiled machine. Like I was full, I knew how to deliver, I knew how to show up for it, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay. What else did I do? So, then we did not add the Happy Thoughts Show podcast until literally was nailed. So that whole system and process was literally like, were we getting it out on time? Was that easy? Was it fitting into my schedule? Were we promoting it multiple times a week? Like, did we have that completely nailed so that when we added Happy Thought Show podcast, it was a stack thing with literally. We were just replicating that process, but I knew I had the time. Team knew they had the time, and we reliably knew about how much time it would take because literally was so down pat. And so it was easy to see like, okay, yes, it is totally possible to stack this right now, but I would have never turned Happy Thoughts into a podcast if I felt like it was going to be a shift away from literally, right? And it really takes a lot of intention and patience because sometimes we just do things and we don't think about that. Like we're just like, oh yeah, I'll add that podcast. That's cool. That's awesome. No problem. Then we get there and then we find that we're letting go of the other things more and more. So just really paying attention to that and making that like your absolute highest intent is to be stacking, not shifting, and seeing that it's not just like do more, do more, do more. It's like do more in a stack. And so just like reframing that and turning that to like my highest intent is that is really helpful because I feel like now it all feeds each other, right? Versus like it all feeling like it's competing with my time and energy and all of that kind of stuff. It's like it all fits together, right? Good. Okay, cool. You're so welcome, Lauren. What else? And then another thing that we did as a stack is we make DIY products when we do live events most of the time. So that's really a stack for us as well. It's not like, should we spend time making a small paid product or should we be running live conversion events or whatever? It's like, that's a stack for us because it's like we run the event live and then we'll turn it into a paid product. And so it kind of like kills two birds with one stone. But it is a stack because we're not deciding between the two and we're not constantly shifting. Anytime I want a paid product, I will run it as a live event first. And so that way, like the decision is never like, are we focused just on like low cost DIY? Are we focused on outward audience style? It's not that. It's like a stack, right? It's like we're always focused on the audience build first, and then we always turn that into a paid offer. So those are just some of the ways we've stacked at A Lit Up Life. Another one I would say is that this year, actually, what we added was 3-day-a-week client lessons on Instagram. So So that was interesting because at first I really thought that was going to be an easy stack. And then I was really finding that that was quite a hard stack. But two things are true there. One is I made sure if I was going to be inconsistent with something, it was the thing I was adding. Okay. So when I was kind of like in that interim place where I was like, oh, this is an easy stack for 2020. Again, let's add it. It was kind of like my ad this year. When I felt like that was going to be an easy stack and then it wasn't, I really was intentional about being like, this cannot replace anything. Like if something is not getting done, it has to be this thing. And that's really hard to do because it was like, there's like energy and excitement towards the new thing almost. So it's like, you know, if you're like, oh, I like really have to like, whatever, write that piece of content for my Facebook group, but I would so much rather be filming that story. Like it takes a lot of conscious effort to be like, no, like I know what thing I'm stacking. And if there's anything I'm going to be inconsistent with, it's that. It's not any of the foundation that I've laid below it. Right. So that's an important way to think about it. If you were trying to stack and then having that struggle, because that totally happened to me. And then when I was like in that place, what I did was think about, okay, like this is not working. Like, how are we making this a stack? So initially I was going to do it 5 days a week and I was going to do it at the end of each day. So if you don't know, I do client daily, like 3-minute client lessons on Instagram. And so I was trying to do it 5 days a week and I was trying to do it at the end of the day after client sessions. And I was being really inconsistent with it. And at first I was kind of like giving myself grace. I was like, it's okay. This is new. We're stacking this. It's okay if I'm inconsistent at first. And then I was realizing like, I don't see how this is going to change because sometimes I was getting to the end of the day and just feeling like I just like can't do that right now. Like I need to finish answering client emails and then I have a stop time that I want to actually abide by, or like I was just forgetting or whatever. And so long story short, what we end up doing is crunching it into 3 days and then I pre-record some of them. So sometimes you're going to have to play with what a stack what kind of stack works for you, but just do not let the things under it become the things that you start to let go of and are inconsistent with. It took me a while to find my rhythm with like, what's going to work in terms of stories. Like what's going to work? Okay, we need to cut it down to 3 days a week. I'm not going to do Mondays and Fridays now. We need to get some pre-recorded so I have some spaciousness on those days where I'm really busy, things like that. So it really did take time to kind of nail that, but I kept making sure it was a stack and being really, really, really intentional about it not being a shift. Does that make sense? Jillian says, just joining. Lacey, totally off topic, but you look like the missing Gilmore girl. That is hysterical. And I will totally take that as a compliment. So I'm going to rock with that and tell people thank you, Jillian. That's so funny. Cool. So hopefully that makes sense. Where like sometimes the stack isn't always super easy and it does feel inconsistent at first. It's just like letting that be the inconsistent thing. What so many people do in the online space is the exact opposite. Then they make something else that they've already really worked up to become inconsistent. And then like the house of cards starts to crumble a little bit. But if you can be really intentional about being like, I know this is the thing that I'm adding. And so if I'm going to be inconsistent with anything, it has to be this. That really gives you some perspective and it really helps you to like test and tweak the thing to actually make it work in your business. So I think that's pretty much it. Totally a compliment. Yes, I will definitely take that. I think that's pretty much it in terms of examples that I have, but this is just something I believe in so much. And I think it is just such an easy question to ask ourselves, but it can be really hard to answer. But if you really stay consistent on answering this question and really make sure the things you're doing are stacks, you will be absolutely freaking amazed at how easy your business can get over time. Oh, I know what I wanted to talk about. Talk about the one time I think you should shift and not stack. So I'm going to tell you that in a second, but this is like how ease is created, you guys. Like when people say things like business is so easy, things are so easy for me, The only thing I stacked this year was those client lessons on Instagram. That's it. Like, so this year I'm basically nailing that, right? And then I'm going to have that down, which I feel like we mostly do now, right? And we're solid on that. Like last year I added podcasts. We get that down. We get really solid on it. It feels super easy. Then we add a new thing. So there's only ever one like hard thing happening in your business at a time, because the rest should be simple and stacked, right? And again, should feel really easy. Where business tends to feel really hard sometimes, it's because we're doing multiple things that we haven't yet nailed, and we're all over the place and it feels really hard. So this is how you can make ease happen, but it's also just how you can make exponential results. Like even if you think of that visual, stacking creates really fast growth, right? Shifting is like really inconsistent, really not sure, and it's going to take a long time to get there. But here's the one time I really do believe in shifting. And actually, a client, yeah, I got to think about this. A client file is going out on this, I think tomorrow. I hope I'm not wrong, but I'm pretty sure tomorrow, on actually someone that totally shifted, and how it really worked for her business. But I only want you to think about shifting if it's like a full on alignment and long-term vision mismatch, right? So when I gave the example of courses and stacking versus shifting, if say you used to teach courses on something that is just not in alignment for you anymore and does not feel good to teach at all and is not matching your long-term vision, by all means shift. Like I am a big believer in like shift based on alignment. Again, I have a client lesson coming out about that where we basically shifted her whole business and she went from making like $800 a month to 25K in like the span of 2 months. Like there is something to be said for actually showing up and selling in a way into a thing that is in alignment for you. So there is a time to shift sometimes, but most people want to shift because they think they're not doing enough, or they think they're not getting enough results, or they think there's some other magic shiny thing that's going to make it all better. That is not a good reason to shift. Okay, just to be clear, but shifting for alignment and long-term vision and values, totally different conversation. Jillian says, fuck yes, I'm trying to get so many of my business partner clients to do this. Exactly. It makes such a freaking difference. I love that you're encouraging them on that. So there is a time and a place to shift, right? But it is not if you're staying the same course and you just think that this is going to get you a faster result. The way to get fast results is to stack, I promise you. But again, you may shift because like it is simply not in alignment and it is not matching your long-term vision and opportunities there. That's a totally different conversation, but you know in doing that you're going to shift and then you're going to start restacking. So that client lesson that's going out, we shifted, but now we're stacking again. Like we're not going to keep shifting. We shifted for an alignment reason. I hope that's just like a helpful distinction there in terms of like, I'm not saying never change anything, but I am saying really be intentional about what you're changing and pay attention to your reason. Like if your reason is like, well, so-and-so's getting better results using this, stack it then. How do you make it work? How do you stack it on top of it? If the answer is I have no place to stack it, how do you have the patience to delegate and wait that out until you do, right? Like business really does take intention and patience and strategy. It's not just like, what else can I add? What else can I do? What else should I try? Like that is not the way to run it. So question to ask yourself next time is, can I stack this? If the answer is yes, rock on. If it's not, then your job is to figure out how you can get to a stack point where you can. Time tracking team time, calendaring, things like that are going to give you good eyes on it. But really make sure to answer this question, because I just freaking promise you, it's going to give you so much more results, make your life so much freaking easier. Jillian says, I've done a huge shift in my business into alignment, but definitely is the thing that feels amazing and falling into place. Well, I'm still just trying to show up consistently on IG and really not much else. Can't wait to watch the first part of this live. Yes, Jillian, that's exactly what I talked about. I said it backwards. Basically, I said, you know, like say you're just showing up on Facebook, nail that before you jump to Insta, but like similar to you here, right? Like you're just trying to get consistent with Instagram, and then you can add and stack more things on top of it. But I think that is like such a wise approach. That feels slower at the time, but is actually the foundation to get more results faster. I think that's so smart. Harjat that said that this was hugely valuable. Thank you. You're so welcome. Thank you for being here. Cool. So I think that's it. Oh, I do want to add one more thing because I think this is important, which is this is sort of the problem with a lot of courses and coaching in our industry, is that a lot of people will follow you through shifts and not really, really challenge you to stack. So what I mean by that is, like, sometimes, you know, with coaches, like you'll come to them and be like, I have this new idea. And they're like, okay, let's run with it. Let's make a plan. They're not like, wait, should we run with this new idea? Right? So that's a great question to ask if you're thinking about working with a coach, getting coaching, is like, do you believe in stacking versus shifting, and how will you help hold me accountable to that? Because so often coaches will almost like forget to ask that piece or forget to focus on that piece. And so if you come to them and you're like, oh, I want to launch this, I want to add this strategy, they're like, okay. And they like go right into thinking about how to help you do that versus how to help you ask the question if you should. So if you're looking for a coach right now, I'd definitely be asking that question. And then same with a course or anything else that you're doing. About to invest in this course, can I stack it on top of what I'm already doing? Or does this course help me stack? Or does this course really encourage shifting? Because again, like a lot of times, like in groups or in one-on-one coaching, like they're really encouraging you to implement whatever thing you've just decided on instead of to think about if that decision makes a lot of sense. So this can also be a really good filter in terms of hiring and deciding next steps, is just asking someone this too, like, how are you going to help me stack versus shift, and like see what they say, whether that's group program coaching, whatever. This is just a really good filter, because sometimes we do need someone to call us on that, right? Like I, you know, do that to my clients all the time, and they're like amazing, smart business women, but sometimes we just need that outside source to, you know, hold us to that. So good filter question if you're thinking about coaching, mastermind, whatever that is. Kristen said, I love this. I didn't really know about stacking and how awesome that would be for growth. Focus on foundation first, then stack. Love it. Shifting is time consuming AF. And I feel like I've done this and of course got nowhere. 100%. It's so time consuming, so tiring, so draining. So I'm so glad that this was helpful. And Claire said, so much time can get lost with shifting. 100%. Like, I think that it's like really hard because at the beginning, it's hard to see that. You're like, I just want to do all the things to speed up the timeline. And like invariably, that's actually what slows it down. It's just so hard to see that. So that's why like asking that question in coaching, getting coaching that's going to help you do that is really, really, really important. So happy Monday. That is that. Again, so sorry for my slip of the tongue earlier. Not something I meant to say, and just very apologetic for that. But what else do I want to tell you? Oh, you can also join our one-on-one waitlist if you are interested in getting coaching around this. We are currently full for 2020, but we have a waitlist going for 2021 right now. You also get access to kind of like a little mini membership site with me where you can submit questions to me each month. I record answers and you can watch all the previous month's answers. I think we have 4 or 5, 6. We have like 9 or 10 videos in there right now, so that you get access to that as private content, not anywhere else. So you can join us at a lit up life/waitlist. So hopefully we'll see you guys there. And yeah, just really ask yourself this, continue to ask this when you're hiring coaches. Talk to your team about this. It will help you so much. All right. So I love you guys. Happy Monday. I'll talk to you soon.